So good evening. Welcome to a brand new episode of No Planet B. The topic of discussion today is why must cities lead the climate battle? In the first episode of No Planet B, we discussed regarding the impacts that climate change have on our cities. For example, heat waves, floods, pollution. Today, we'll be discussing more about the implementation measures that can help us to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Joining us live is Mythili Madhavan. She is an IPCC contributing author. After graduating architecture from National Institute of Technology, Calicut, she went ahead to pursue masters in habitat management from CEPT University. As a consultant at Indian Institute of Human Settlements, Bengaluru, she has contributed to research and advisory projects pertaining to climate change adaptation, disaster management, and renewable energy. I'm so happy to have Mythili with us today. Let's welcome her to our episode. Hi Mythili.
Hi, Shruthi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So happy to be here.
No, it's my pleasure. My first question to you, Mythili, is first thing, how important or how responsible are our cities for the triple planetary crisis? To our viewers, it's an umbrella term that refers to the three main interlinking issues that humanity is currently facing. One, climate change. Two, biodiversity loss. And three, pollution. So what are your thoughts regarding that?
Sure. So first off, I just wanted to say thank you, Shruthi, for inviting me here. I think it's a great initiative and I hope you go places with this podcast.
Thank you so much.
So coming to your question, so we all know that cities are the driving force of social, economic, and environmental change. And owing to the large population, high density, exposure to climate change, cities really concentrate risk. So many urban activities are the reason for major greenhouse gas emissions. And really, according to studies, it's about 75% of global carbon emissions. Majorly coming from, as we know, transport, buildings, energy usage, and so on and so on. This is the largest contributor. So this rapid urbanization results in a lot of, overburdening of services such as waste management, water services, and eventually this all leads to pollution. And there's also, a growing number of slum dwellers and, people living in informal settlements who are again more vulnerable to all these risks. So cities are definitely the driving force of the triple planetary crisis of, climate pollution and biodiversity loss. Urban areas generate a lot of waste, which is poorly managed, again, due to burdening of services. And this, again, adversely affects people's health, it creates pollutions, and harms the ecosystems. So according to, I think, WHO air quality guidelines, 9 out of 10 people in urban areas are breathing polluted air. And not the air quality index that people should be breathing. And this urban sprawl transforms landscapes which affect biodiversity and ecosystems. And biodiversity loss is something that all of us know is happening, but most conveniently ignore it. We know species are disappearing, and we tell ourselves that this is the price we have to pay for getting more developed cities. And obviously deforestation for making way for more construction and developed cities had led to this situation. And when we get into more depth, and I don't want to get into a lot of technicality, I'm just trying to make it a more layperson, discussion. There's ocean habitat loss due to overfishing, pollution due to waterway transportation, and so on. So if you look at it closely, rapid urbanization had led to this whole situation. And this linkage between cities and environment is it's so interesting because we can see how dependent cities are on environment, and at the same time, it sort of degrades environment in a very harmful way. So cities definitely have a critical role to play in this fight against the climate battle and the global goal to meet the Paris Agreement. And I think building sustainable and resilient cities is extremely essential.
That makes a lot of sense. But then I'm pretty sure there's no one-step solution to it. But there are multiple measures that one needs to look at individual, organizational, national, international levels. But for you personally, is there this one particular plan or a strategy that you strongly advocate for?
Not really, because like you said, there's different levels of actions that can be taken, and individual level is really, what we can do, and that's really making a small impact if you look at it from like a one-person perspective. Say, I am not using plastics, I am following a vegan lifestyle, and a lot of things. But again, it does not really make a whole bunch of difference from an individual level until and unless a lot of people, come together and like communities come together, joining the initiative. There should be, I think there's a lot of awareness now. Time than how it was before, because I remember how I had to, even with close friends, I had to really talk about climate change and people didn't really care. It was something oh, climate change, you're part of climate change, which is not really, people didn't take it seriously, but I think there's a lot of awareness now and there should be more. And one small thing is that I realized after moving to Canada that India has really come a long way forward than many other countries in terms of actions and initiatives. Because you know how we didn't have plastics. We don't have plastics for a long time. You don't get plastic bags from grocery stores or so on. But that's not the case here. I was so surprised. My house is filled with plastic bags because you can't avoid it after coming here. So those type of small things are something that really fascinated me because India, even though we say that it's part of a lot of emissions, there's a lot of emissions when you look at it like from a country perspective, but it's still extremely less compared to what US or China is making. Put it in perspective for you. So, for example, China has like 10 tons, for example, and we are only at 2.5. So it's that level of difference. So I think in Indian cities, especially, the cities are like the focal point where you can meet multiple goals of climate adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development. And India is, as we all know, is increasingly becoming urban. Many cities are taking actions. I think it's a really promising way to look at all of these actions. For example, CEPT which was started like a decade ago, when climate change was not really acknowledged worldwide. So I think if you look at Indian actions in Indian cities, you can see that there is like three types of actions. System focused, for example, like ecosystem based actions. Then there's risk focused, which I think is common. For example, there's flooding and there's like flooding proofing, there's heat waves in cities like Ahmedabad or Hyderabad where they have heat action plans. So there are specific risk focused actions. And then there's process focused actions where there is project based interventions, like for example, smart cities. So there's smart cities all over in different cities, and they have climate-related interventions. So it's part of a project or sector-related. For example, water sector, you have like a lot of actions for water conservation and so on. These are the kind of thing that is followed. So it's not really looking at the bigger picture. I'm not saying that these are the actions. This is necessary. But we need to look at it from a bigger picture. So I think there's space for adaptation actions in Indian cities where they'll have mitigation co-benefits and SDG co-benefits. So this is what can be called as a triple win, which can be achieved, I think, by like a few measures. So I'll get to it. One major thing is we've all heard nature-based solutions. So, like I mentioned, actions are often risk-focused. So when I say nature-based solution, our mind immediately goes to planting trees. Of course, it's important, but actions should not be limited just to this. So I can see many initiatives where they'll say, okay, we are planting X number of trees, and they just leave it at that, just to cover the climate change umbrella. But there should be actions that simultaneously provide human being and biodiversity benefits.
Okay.
So I think there's a more visionary and transformative approach to the urban green infrastructure that should be initiated. For example, urban agriculture, which I think is a great initiative, which actually provides mitigation benefits such as air quality improvement, lower food miles, and adaptation benefits such as reduced impact of heat waves. So there's a terrace garden and you are growing your own vegetables. So these are the benefits that you get out of it. And of course, ties into SDG2 with benefits of nutrition. You're getting organic food without all of the chemicals. So this is one example of a triple win. So nature-based solution is one. And another thing is mainstreaming disaster risk reduction into climate plans. So
Sorry, can you please repeat?
Mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in climate plans.
Okay.
So we can see that there's a lot of extreme events happening, and most often we see this as like a one-off event. For example, Kerala flood. When it came in 2018, we were all like, okay, this something just happened this year, and it repeated, and it might repeat. So we are not ready to accept it as something that's part of a cascading set of events. We are just looking at it as one-off events. So I think that's why mainstreaming is really important. So like I said, there's risk-based actions that's more discrete and short-term rather than part of being a continuum of long-term risk. And another major thing is there's a lot of focus on flooding or things, events that are more visible. So you can experience heat wave, you can experience flooding, but you don't know what a sea level rise. You've heard of it, and you think that it's something that will come to far future. But it will come all of a sudden, like how we are having extreme events. So just because it's not very visible, it's not looked at very closely. So I think that also needs to change. And all of this can be, incorporated if we mainstream disaster resilience into action plan. Another third point that I wanted to make in terms of, an action plan that can be looked for cities is to reorient existing policies to enable climate resilient development. So currently, the policies do not really look at climate risk or provide a steer for climate adaptation. So in such a case where there is no formal strategy, people tend to cope by themselves to all of these changing climate and extreme events. For example, there's this paper I read where in Mumbai there's a lot of flooding, and for the long time there has been no actions. Maybe like short-term actions were there, but in many places there were no action. So people started to adapt by themselves, by making structural changes by themselves to their housing, and which will eventually lead to more destruction and maladaptation in the future, like breaking the platform to protect their belongings, or just all of these small changes. So I think there should be policy implemented through subsidies or taxes, and there should be awareness building for sure through like targeted outreach programs, and most importantly, I think financial, innovation should be there. Climate finance is a really important aspect, which I think is a whole other subject, which I'll not get into in detail. But for example, I've seen recently in my current company that they're looking at creating innovative financial instrument for biodiversity conservation. So they're tying up and all of these organizations to make a new financial instrument so that that can be put into use for biodiversity conservation. So these kind of innovation, I think, is really helpful in the future. So like you mentioned, there's no one way to one ideal action plan. If we incorporate multiple of these factors, I think it will be a good enough action plan. Yeah.
That's a well put answer. You had mentioned the point regarding where India stands today. So I would like to ask you this question. I'm curious regarding this is ever widening gap between A, to set climate objectives, B, to have the political will for it, and then have the budgeting for it, and most importantly, successful implementation of any action plan. This is something we practically face in any urban governance. But do you have, can you share a success story with us where climate action plans have been successfully incorporated or integrated with the urban governance? It will really be an inspiration to all of us.
So, at least as far as I know, there's not a comprehensive plan that is fully operational yet. But I can think of a couple of small examples. One is, we all know Mumbai recently released the Climate Action Plan, which I think is a really good example. Well, at least in paper, because it's just begun. In India, there's a study done by a couple of us looking at Indian cities, where we looked at 57 Indian cities, and at least 30, more than 35 cities have actions. And that's I think it's a great thing, even though it's not a comprehensive city resilience plan or adaptation plan. There's solid actions that's being implemented, not just in papers, but the rest of the cities, again, they have something in paper, they don't really implement it. So maybe they're formulating plans as part of, some policy, but they are not getting funding. So it does not take off. So I think if it takes off, Mumbai Climate Action Plan is a great example because it outlines net zero goals that are already in line with the state targets. And they actually try to make it, they have higher targets, and it's way ahead of what India has already planned for its target year. And I think there's a healthy mix of mitigation and adaptation actions also outlined in the plan. For example, there's urban greening, biodiversity-related actions, flood and water resource management, and renewable energy transition. I think renewable energy transition is something that all of the states are looking at, considering the national target. And one great thing I think is, which many of the plans are missing, is looking at the vulnerable community. For example, Mumbai has the largest slum, and you cannot really do a lot of things there because it's like a large settlement, and you have to really consider them, but not really disturb them. So I think this plan really outlines how they'll, ensure inclusivity and safety of these communities, and that's why I think this is an excellent example. This recently in paper, but one that I can think of is worth mentioning is Surat City Resilience Strategy, which started in 2011, which when you come to think of it, it's a decade back. And the cities actually, before I was reading, I didn't know Surat was exposed to so much so much risk, such as coastal flooding, sea level rise, cyclones, inundation with storm tides and whatnot. So all of this was considered into this resilience strategy. And one great thing is Surat actually has a climate change trust at urban governance level. that's tied up with the municipality, and they all work together for the city resilience plan. So I don't think there's another climate change trust established in any city, especially at that time. So I think that's sort of this really like a forerunner when it comes to resilience strategy. I think some of the actions that I can remember is mapping flood risk, which is very important to map the areas, vulnerable areas, regulating construction and floodplains, improve sanitation through, increasing capacity of sewage treatment plants, reuse of grey water in parks and gardens. And this is like a handful of initiatives that I can think of, a lot more. And again, the flip side to this is they did not receive consistent funding, which is an important urban climate action plans. So securing funds beyond project cycle, I think, is something that lagged, and they were not able to do it. And that's where the fiscal autonomy of urban local bodies is important. That's where the 74th Amendment comes into picture, how there should be urban governance. So even if this was the case, I think this is one of the earliest action plans in Indian city, and I think it's a path breaker for the plans that I can think of.
Even it's news to me that Surat had actually had an action plan in 2011 itself.
Yeah, you should take a look at it, because you can see how they've actually tried to look at all of these risks. And I'm not sure if the Climate Change Trust is still operating, but I think that plan is worth looking at.
I would also love to know how it is being at the moment, how it is being implemented. And thank you. That was, and my last question to you today is a little tricky, but I'm very curious to know your thoughts about it. So in the COP26, India has promised that we'll reach net zero emissions by 2070. So as a climate change researcher, are you optimistic that India can meet its obligations? And is there any major roadblocks in our journey? Like, there are multiple, but...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think this is the most discussed topic for the last 5-6 months, the COP26. And I remember for the COP26, I was working with IHS, and my colleagues and we were watching live because some of our colleagues were attending it, and
wow,
really looking forward to what was going to happen. And I think the commitment put forward by India is really bold, and it's extremely ambitious. And I think it's definitely achievable. Again, given certain considerations. And one thing that is most interesting is that the roadmap laid out in that 5-point plan has targets that are totally linked with the already existing domestic targets. So I had worked on multiple projects, and one of them was on renewable energy. And I was looking at how India's renewable energy situation is, how are the targets, and I think we are way ahead of our targets right now. And the growth just like this, I think it's definitely achievable. So, for example, when I say it's linked with the domestic targets, so like National Solar Mission, or India has given a target to INDC to achieve 40% of cumulative electric power, like installed capacity of non-fossil fuel-based energy resources by 2030. So this just at the COP26, they raised it a little bit further to like a non-fossil fuel capacity to 500 gigawatts. We just raised it a bit. And I think it's definitely achievable considering the growth we've had in the past decade or so. Like, renewable energy transition replaces a major source of carbon emission, the fossil fuel. So we managed to achieve. So I'm looking forward to 2030, and if we manage to meet the target set for 2030, I think there's definitely hope. Again, the key is consistent implementation of actions that were promised. Like I mentioned, things are there on paper, but most multiple factors come into picture, and things do not go the way they're really meant to be. And not all the plans translate to actions, but I really hope this one does.
For example, COVID was one major.
Yeah, that pulled us all back in all the sectors. And again, we were way ahead in our plastic game, but look what happened. But that kind of things are really, you can't really do anything about it. These, again, similar to extreme events, you have to tackle it when it's there. But again, we can prepare in future to do this better. Some roadblocks that I can think of is one, like I mentioned, vulnerable communities should be taken care of, like economically weaker sections and people living in formal settlements. So according to the plan, it does consider the aspect, but I think it's very tricky to achieve and it's very challenging. One thing about renewable energy is I've heard people say it's like a rich people thing. You can afford it only if you have, like, you are part of a certain economically well-off person. But it's really pulling people backwards, vulnerable communities backwards. So I think that should not happen. There should be climate justice. It's an important, there should be equitable access, energy, and growth to every single person. And we should not burden the vulnerable communities and pull them really backwards from where they currently are. And inclusivity is key in this. So that's one major, I think, challenge that we have to address. And another challenge, when we're talking about renewable energy, India is still dependent on coal for its energy. A major chunk of it comes from coal. And a lot of jobs are associated with it. So you can't just ignore the people who are part of this job. And I think there's this documentary that you should watch, where people, I think, in the northern part of India, where they are involved in this job of coal mining, and how they're really worried this whole renewable energy transition is going to affect them in a very bad way. So I think they should be considered, and the transition should be done equitably as possible. So that's a major roadblock. And another, I think, the small thing, agriculture again is like a largest source of livelihood in India, and the methane emissions, it's not easy to reduce from agriculture, even though it's like a small percentage. I think that's a major challenge. And another thing is, again, we say it's like it looks very easy, like renewable energy transition. You install solar roofs, you're set. But that's really like the home level thing that we're talking, or commercial level. But when we look at industrial level, it's very difficult to decarbonize industries. I think that's a real challenge. And again, industries which are like small and medium-sized industries, I think that's where there will be challenge, because it's not like they're well-off industries and they can afford all of these changes. A sudden decarbonization is not possible. You need newer and advanced clean technologies and a lot of similar things to make small and medium-sized industries, reduce their emissions. So I think there needs to be, and that cannot be done alone just by, there needs to be collaboration worldwide. So I think these are some of the challenges that I can think of, but I think it's definitely possible.
That brings me to the end of this episode. But Mythili, let me tell you, I can keep listening to you. You made the concept so easy for me and for the viewers to understand.
I hope so. I hope I didn't get too technical.
You did. And thank you so much for this episode and saying yes to this podcast. And it made my day, and I'm sure our viewers loved today's episode too.
Thanks so much, Shruthi. I mean, I'm so glad that you were doing this, and I can suggest a lot of people who will be great for this. And yeah, like, I know I can keep talking, and but let's.
And I can keep listening.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much.
And thank you to our lovely viewers, and stay tuned for more episodes under No Planet B. Thank you, Mythili.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.